Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're doing something a little different. I've gathered a few stories that I guarantee will make you sweat. These aren't your typical jump scare fables. These are the kind of stories that sit in the back of your mind long after the video ends, making you double-check the locks on your front door. So, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe leave a small light on if you're feeling a bit uneasy. We're about to dive into the first tale of the evening, a story about a quiet night that turned into a living nightmare.
It started on a Tuesday night. Mark was home alone, enjoying the rare silence of his suburban neighborhood. The rain was drumming a steady, hypnotic beat against the roof, and he was nearly asleep on the sofa when a sharp, rhythmic knocking echoed through the house. It wasn't the front door, though. It was coming from the basement door, right inside the kitchen. Mark froze. He didn't have a roommate, and he certainly didn't have any pets. The knocking was slow, deliberate, and heavy, like someone was using their knuckles to test the strength of the wood.
Mark stood up, his heart hammering against his ribs. He approached the kitchen, every floorboard creak sounding like a gunshot in the silent house. He called out, his voice cracking, "Who's there?" The knocking stopped instantly. Total silence returned, but it felt heavy, pressurized. He reached for the handle, his palms sweaty and slick. Just as his fingers grazed the cold metal, a voice whispered from the other side. It wasn't a growl or a scream. It was the soft, unmistakable voice of his mother, who had passed away 3 years ago. She just said, "Mark, let me in. It's cold down here."
He backed away, tripping over a kitchen chair. He knew it wasn't her. The logic in his brain fought against the primal fear in his chest. He grabbed his phone and dialed the police, but the line was just static, a high-pitched whining static that seemed to sync up with a new sound from the basement. Scratching. Long, sharp nails dragging down the wood of the door from top to bottom. He didn't wait. He ran for the front door, bolted outside into the pouring rain, and didn't look back until he reached the bright lights of a 24-hour gas station a mile away. When the police checked the house, the basement door was wide open, but the basement itself was empty.
Pretty intense, right? It makes you wonder what's actually hiding in the places we think are safe. But let's move on to our second story. This one takes us away from the suburbs and deep into the woods. There's something about the forest at night that changes the rules of reality. The trees seem to lean in a little closer, and the shadows behave in ways they shouldn't. This story comes from a hiker named Sarah, who thought she knew the local trails like the back of her hand. She was wrong. Very, very wrong.
Sarah had stayed out too late trying to catch the perfect sunset photograph. By the time she packed her gear, the blue hour had faded into a pitch-black night. She turned out her headlamp, but the beam felt weak against the devouring darkness of the woods. About halfway down the mountain, she realized the trail didn't look right. The familiar oak trees were replaced by twisted gray trunks she didn't recognize. And then the smell hit her, a cloying, sweet scent of rot and old flowers. That's when she heard the whistling. It was a cheerful, upbeat tune, completely out of place in the middle of the wilderness.
She stopped moving, hoping the whistler would just pass by. But the tune stayed stationary, coming from just behind a large rock formation, about 20 feet away. Sarah called out a greeting, trying to sound brave, but no one answered. The whistling just looped, over and over. She decided to go off-trail to bypass the rock. As she scrambled through the brush, her light caught something. There was a man standing perfectly still, facing a tree. He was wearing a suit that looked decades old, and he was whistling that same tune. But as she moved, she realized he didn't have a back to his head. It was just a hollow shell of hair and bone.
Sarah didn't scream. She couldn't. Her lungs felt like they had turned to lead. She backed away slowly, keeping her light on the figure. It didn't chase her. It didn't even move. It just kept whistling that happy, terrifying tune. She ran until her feet bled, finally stumbling onto the main road just as dawn began to break. When she looked at the photos she took that night, every single one was corrupted with streaks of gray and white, except for one. In the corner of her final sunset shot, a suit-clad figure was visible in the distance, already watching her from the tree line. That brings us to our final story, and this one is a bit more personal. Have you ever looked in a mirror and felt like your reflection was just a fraction of a second behind you? This story explores that exact sensation. It involves a young woman named Elena who moved into a beautiful old apartment with floor-to-ceiling mirrors in the hallway. At first, she loved the aesthetic. It made the place feel huge and bright. But after a week, she started noticing small things. A blink that lasted too long. A smile that didn't reach the eyes of her reflection. It was subtle, but it was there. One evening, while Elena was washing her face, she splashed some water on her eyes. When she looked up and wiped them dry, her reflection was still leaning over the sink, hands cupped with water. She stood frozen, staring at the back of her own reflection's head. Slowly, the girl in the mirror stood up. Their eyes met in the glass. The reflection didn't look scared. It looked hungry. It reached out and pressed its hand against the surface of the glass, and Elena felt the cold vibration of the touch on her own skin. The reflection whispered, "Trade with me," and the glass began to ripple like water. Elena smashed the mirror with a heavy soap dispenser and fled the bathroom. She spent the rest of the night in her bedroom, covering every reflective surface with sheets and cowls. The next morning, she moved out. She didn't even take her clothes. She lives in a modern apartment now, one with no mirrors at all. She does her makeup using the front-facing camera on her phone. But even then, sometimes she thinks the image on the screen lingers just a second too long after she puts the phone down. It's a reminder that once you notice the glitch notices you too. Well, I hope those stories gave you the chills you were looking for. There's something truly haunting about the things we can't quite explain, isn't there? If you enjoyed these tales and want to hear more, make sure you stick around. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates. It really helps the channel out and ensures you never miss a new story. Stay safe out there, keep the lights on if you need to, and I'll see you in the next one. Sweet dreams, if you can get any.